Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Mehul, and in this video, we'll be doing a complete MERN stack application development using all the 4-letter technologies: MongoDB, Express, React, and Node.js. So this is what MERN stack is. These are 4 technologies which you can use to develop a full application. It's a convention, people say MERN stack, but pretty much you would use a lot of other technologies as well. So in this video, I want to just go ahead and show you how you can develop a full complete application only using MERN stack. Let's go. If you're new here, consider subscribing because I'll be adding more such interactive content and things which we can do here. So make sure you like and subscribe to this video. And let's just go ahead and see how we can build a MERN stack application. Okay, so right now you can see on my screen that we have a simple text editor and that's it. I have just this folder, we have index.js, and that's it. There's nothing else. So we're going to be starting from the very scratch in this video and taking a look at every single part of the application. So the first things first, we know that MERN stack is Mongo plus Express plus React plus Node. Now, to be honest, Express plus Node thing is fine because if you're using Express, it doesn't make a lot of sense because if you're using Express, you're automatically using Node.js. It's kind of redundant, but it's okay. We'll start with setting up a simple React app because that can also run standalone. But what you have to remember is when inside development, you would have a Node.js server plus a React server running, right? But when you're running this in production, you will have a Node.js server, but you will have static React files. That is the difference between development and the production thing. And we'll see how we can combine them in the production video and when we are deploying this on the cloud. But for the development part, let's just stick with this setup right here. This means clearly we need 2 things. The first thing is Node.js server, and the second thing is React server or the React project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a directory here called server, and this will just contain our server stuff. And I'm also going to move this index to server, right? And I'm going to create another directory called app or client or whatever you want to name, but we want this to be a React project. So I'm going to initialize this with npx create React app, and this would be just client, right? So this just initializes it with the default React bundle and installing packages and stuff. All right, so you can see now inside our client folder, we have package.json yarn.log file, which means we are running yarn as the package manager. If you see a package-log.json file, it's completely fine. That means you're using npm. If you write npm like this in your terminal and do an npm version, if this happens, this appears as 6 or 7 or whatever version you have at the moment, that's fine. If you're using yarn, that is also fine. These are both package managers, and at least yarn version 1 is basically the similar thing as npm version, whatever you're running 6, 7, 8. So we have this client set up. Now what I want to do is split my terminal here real quick, and I want to go ahead and start this project by saying yarn start, because this is going to start our client project on port number 3000 by default, right? So it opens it up in the browser. It will just compile the stuff. Like I said, this is the React server which I was talking about. When you're doing this on production, when you're deploying this on a real website, you will obviously not have a React server running because React is just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? At the end of the day, React is just JavaScript. And the reason you need this server is because React needs a transpilation step. The JSX which you write, the modern JavaScript syntax which you write, that needs a transpilation step. So Babel, Webpack, all this stuff is sitting in the server and doing that as you type, like the hot reloading stuff and without actually refreshing anything. All that stuff happens. But the moment that happens, you can see that on the screen and it refreshes and all that things. But you don't necessarily need that on a production server. So anyway, let's just keep going. So we have our React app up and ready. What we want to do next is also have our server some sort of, in place. So of the MERN stack, we have already covered the R part. So it's the main time. And so let's just go ahead and start with our main time, which is basically gonna be very simple. First of all, we need to initialize the project because this is a Node project. So we can just say yarn init. If you're using npm, you can say npm init. I'm just going to keep the default options. You can also specify a -y here. But anyway, now you can see we also have a package.json file here. And let me just actually copy this whole thing and save it inside here. All right, so you can see we basically have Node installed on our system, right? I did not talk about that because I was assuming that everyone has Node installed, but if you don't have it, I have a bunch of videos. Probably I will link it somewhere here in the cards at the top right or left, showing you how you can install Node.js. But once we have done that, you will be able to see that it's very easy to set up a project. Now, the next thing you need to do is install Express. Now, Express is a framework. E stands for Express, and Express is just a Node.js framework which allows your application, the server application, to have easier looking syntax. I mean, you can technically still do all of the stuff we do in Express in Node, but it's just easy on eyes, right? It's easy to do. So let's just start with yarn again, yarn add express. And what this will do is this will install the ExpressJS package inside of our server folder. Okay, so the moment we do that, you're going to be seeing that inside package.json we have this, but we're going to be adding another server called yarn add nodemon. So just like you can see that we have React server running, which will reflect, let's say if I go to this app.jsx and say go dam right here and take a look, you can see it updates automatically, right? Similarly, we can do a similar thing with servers using nodemon, where nodemon would just restart the Node.js process if there is any change. Okay, so now you can see we also have nodemon installed. And what I'm going to do more is I'm going to add a script here called dev. So this script just means that whenever I write yarn dev or npx dev or npm run dev, this should happen. What is that? That is nodemon index.js. Right yarn dev, and you can see it runs nodemon index.js, clean exit, waiting for changes before restart, because obviously there is no change yet. Let's just go ahead now and take a look at how we can write our Express server real quick. I'm going to go ahead and say const app or const express is a require express, and once you have express, you need to call this as a function to actually initialize a new application. Then you can specify some routes like hello, for example, and this accepts a request and a response object, which can be used to determine what headers the client has passed or what you want to say to client. In this case, I'm just going to say hello world like this, right? And the final thing you need to do is also start a server, because right now you can see nodemon just runs your node file and exits because there is no long running process, and servers are long running process. So what you want to do is say app.listen, and let's say I want to listen to port number 1337, right? And we can also say something like console.log server started on 1, right? Just a quick notice which you can see in the console. Now what you can see is if you go to localhost 1337 / let's say hello, which is our defined route, you can see we get hello world. Now remember, we have two servers running at the moment. The first one is the React server, which is a fake server because we don't need this in production. And the second one is the Node server, which we will need in the production, right? But for now, we will develop it as if we are having two different servers, right? In production, probably this page would be served right here automatically, right? You can do that still even in this phase, but it will require a lot of patching and you will lose a bunch of features like hot reloading and stuff like that. All right, let's just go ahead and create a very simple app which handles login, registration, and setting up a favorite code inside the dashboard, right? That's all that will be. So what we want to do, first things first, is we want to go ahead and clean up this mess right here. And let's say this is just registration area for us, right? So I'm going to say h1 register, and I'm not going to focus at all on the layout or the CSS part, because the MERN stack, actually we just want to cover how the core functionality works, and GitHub Copilot will be really helpful here. Let's see if it can help. First name, nope, I don't want a lot of stuff, so we can just stick to maybe name, email, and password, right? And what we want to do is really create them as state variables. All right, so now you can see I imported useState from here and set up the basic boilerplate template, which is just having these variables as the state variables and having name, email, and password as these things. And you can see now this works absolutely fine, right? We have a pretty much working form, and you can just inject a bunch of HTML here if you would like, and a final button. So you can say input type submit and then value register, and that's it. Now you can see that we have, let's just go ahead and also give this a BR, but you can see that we have this as a form. So whenever I submit this, I mean, after having the right data, you can see it redirects me to a page. So in order to change that behavior, we'll have a method of, we don't exactly need a method, we can just say on submit and we can specify register user. Now right here, this is the very first point when our front end is going to communicate with the backend, right? And we can make this an asynchronous function. And what we want to do is we want to say that, hey, go ahead and fetch something like this, which code GitHub Copilot is helping me already with. So this is localhost 1337, remember, because we are running this on port number 1337. And we're going to have an API/register route, let's see, where what we're going to do is pass the body as the following object: JSON.stringify, name, email, and password, right? So once we do that, you're going to be seeing that we just send this to the backend. But we also need to tell the backend that, hey, we are going to send this as a content type of application JSON. And why that is necessary? That is necessary because there are a lot of content types. You can send this in a bunch of ways. You can send this as a binary data, you can send this as URL encoded and stuff like this. But the simplest is, for text-based data at least, is JSON. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and wait for the response. And then we are also going to try to convert it into JSON like this. And I'm just going to console log this data right here, right? So this actually ends our first part, in which we just have to go ahead and create a link between the front end and the back end. So now if I have something like this, register, and of course we need to do one more thing, is the event which we get here, we need to set event.prevent default. Why do we need to do this? Because right here you can see forms have a default behavior of refreshing or redirecting to that particular page which you have specified as an action. Let's say this is our email, register, and you can see that we get failed to fetch because again we are missing one thing, that we need a method here of post. Register again, and you can see now we get standard errors, which is fine. We'll fix this in server now. Alright, so the first thing we need to do here is gonna be actually setting up our CORS policy for the local development part. I mean, you can do it for local itself, it's fine. But what you want to do is, first of all, terminate your server and install a package known as yarn add CORS. And the reason you want to add CORS package is because you see this error, access to fetch at this from origin this has been blocked by CORS policy, right? So you're gonna have this error anyway, even if you create your server, if you don't have the correct CORS configuration. Now remember that this page, ideally, this React page ideally would be served by the Node.js same port itself, right? The same server, the same port itself. So you probably don't need CORS on production, but that is required when you're developing at least, because browsers are weird and they require all sorts of security measures, and CORS is one of the security measures, right? So you need to do that. So once you have that, you just have to import it via require CORS and just say that this CORS is a middleware. Now middleware is just a function which manipulates the response and in most of the cases just passes it to the next function, right? So it just says that, hey, this CORS, what this does internally is this, it just sets correct headers on the response so that Chrome allows you to communicate with a cross origin. And why this is a cross origin? Because of the different ports, right? If they were all the same ports, localhost 1337, then it will not be a cross origin. So that is fine. Let's just start our server again by, let's say, node yarn dev, right? So once we do that and refresh, or maybe even not even refresh, you can see right here, we no longer get the CORS error, but actually unexpected greater than symbol or less than in JSON. That is because we are receiving just the wrong response at the moment. So if you go right here, you can see that we get the response. All right, so now it's time to set up a handler called app.post API register. Now the first thing we want to do is, of course, we can just say rest.json status okay, but how do we get the body here, which the user is passing? Because if you do something like console.log request.body, you're gonna see that when I click on register, we pretty much get undefined here in the console, right? So that means we are not receiving the body yet. We are, but that is not available at least on the request.body syntax right here. So the reason for this is because this route does not know that you are passing in JSON, right? And in order to let Express know that, hey, we're gonna be using JSON a lot to parse, to pass the body, what you also want to do is you want to use an express.json as the middleware. So what this does is that it says to Express that, hey, we're going to be going ahead and you should be going ahead and parse anything which comes as body into JSON, right? That's all it does. And also, like, you know, populate the body in the first place, because if it does not, it's just undefined. Anyway, so once we do that, hit on register. Now you can see we get status OK as the response, as well as this data which we got from the front end, right? So that is cool. Okay, so we are basically done with Express and Node here. And the only thing we need to do is link Mongo now, right? So the way we're going to be doing that is by actually installing another package called mongoose. And mongoose allows us to define models and work with MongoDB as well through it, right? So mongoose can be as a, you know, it's an ORM which allows you to connect to MongoDB, but it can be a bit useful for data validation and just schema validation as well. I'm going to be creating a folder here called models, and I'm going to be starting with user.model.js or, you know, user.js, whatever you want to do. So what you want to do is you want to get mongoose first by saying require mongoose like this. And you want to define a model. So you want to say my user model is something like new mongoose.schema, and it should be having a property called name, which is of type string. And this is required property as well. Required true. You can say email type string required to, and password required, you know, GitHub Copilot just taking over the world. We don't want to create an ad. We just want a quote, let's say, which is of type string, and it's probably not required, right? And all we need to do is we want to say that the collection of this model is user data, for example. This is the name of the collection in the MongoDB database which you're creating. Next, we create a model by saying mongoose.model, give it a name like user data or something, and which is the schema associated with it, that is the user. And then finally you just say export, not export default, but module.export, because we are still in CommonJS world. I should have probably done this in ES6 modules, but anyway, we'll probably do it sometime later. Mongoose, this model right here. So this model just allows us to directly access and interact with mongoose. The next thing which we want to do is also import mongoose right here with us. And the reason for this is because we want to connect to mongoose before anything happens, right? And the good thing with mongoose is, although this mongoose.connect returns us a promise, but mongoose internally queues, that is, it puts it in a queue of things to do if the connection is not ready yet. So you can technically just connect it in a synchronous way and just, you know, start using it anywhere you like. So what you want to do is specify a function, specify a string here, connection string. In my case, I'm just running a local host MongoDB. Let me just see if my MongoDB is running. Not really. So I'm just going to start my Docker. For you, you would have to install MongoDB on your system. Again, it is pretty straightforward. Just go to Google, write MongoDB, go to this MongoDB website, download the do a start free or download the community server edition and just start it by yourself. I think if you do go to get started here, now you don't need to probably create an account. Let's see, MongoDB download. Yeah, you want the community download version, and once you download it, it'll install it, open it, it'll automatically be started on port 27017. Okay, so once that is done, you should be able to write something like MongoDB 27017 and the name of the database. And the good thing about MongoDB is, or bad thing depending on how you see it, that you can pretty much specify the database name and collections right away inside the code, and it'll automatically create it if not present. So I can just say this as full MERN stack video, for example, and that's it. It'll automatically create this database, and then when we use this user model, it will automatically create this user data collection. All right, so once we have this, all we need to do is we can actually go ahead in the model and do one more thing. We can say the email address is also unique. So what this would do is this will create an index in MongoDB, which will be on uniqueness. That is, there would not be a duplicate value for email, or it will just throw us an error, right? So what we want to do is you want to convert this into an async function and throw it inside a try catch. So we want to say, okay, rest.json error is fine, but we also want to say, let's see what CodePilot has to offer. Yep, that is pretty much it. That is pretty much it. That's what we want to do. But it's always a good practice to not just arbitrarily use user data, but instead do something like this, right? Because now I know that, hey, I'm in control, right? What goes into the database. And yep, I think that's all we are getting from the user side, right? Name, email, password. Yep, that is true. And then we finally say rest.json, status okay, right? Otherwise, inside catch, if we are arriving, we know that the record is already found, it is duplicate. So we can just say status error, and then error is duplicate email, right? Something like this. You can perform more validation here depending on maybe like your name should be certain characters, your email should be certain characters, and so on. But this is like the bare minimum version you should do in order to handle the errors as well. Okay, so once that is done with us, let's just quickly go ahead and create a login route as well. And maybe actually, let's just say, yeah, I think we can just go ahead and create a login route. Right here, what we'll say is, instead of user.create, we want user.find1 with an email of request.body.email and password of request.body.password. And this is actually a bad practice to store passwords in plain text, which we'll shortly cover how we should fix this. But we can just say that if we have a user right here, and we can just remove the try catch from here because it will not fail if we have a user until and unless your MongoDB connection itself fails. But yeah, then we just say return rest.json, status okay, and then user true. For example, we'll return some sort of authentication information here ideally. Else what we want to do is just return rest.json, error, and user false. That's it. All right, I think we have the bare bones code ready with us. We can start it with nodemon yarn dev. And once we do that, you can see we get some MongoDB warnings. It needs some new flags here, which is fine. I mean, they're just warnings at the moment. But what you can do now is go back right here, and you can start with, let's say, a@b.c, right? And Mehul, let's say, is the name and the password. So when I register now, you can see that we get a duplicate email, which is probably not what we were expecting. So let's just debug what is going wrong by also console logging the error, right? So now if we register, go to the console, you can see that we have an error saying user is not defined. Very well, because we probably did not import this model. So what we want to do is also import it from models user.model, right? And of course, this would be screaming loud if you were using TypeScript. That is one of the reasons I like TypeScript, of one of the many reasons I should rather say. But yeah, you can see now we get status okay, and here also we get the console log. If I try to create this user again, then we will actually get a status error, right? Which is now correct in this case. In this case, you can see the error which we get from MongoDB is right here. You cannot actually see it very well because the error.message is kind of hidden here, which is like, this is the error message, right? But yeah, I mean, you can technically just take out this error message and detect if this is truly an error of duplicate key or not, because just like you saw in any other case, it will return you this error. So it's not very tight, but anyway, that's fine to start. Okay, so we are very close to creating our basic full stack application here. We have a registered user. Let's just go ahead and create a simple login page as well. So I'm going to say login.js, and it's not going to contain name, but pretty much everything else. It will be login, it will be login user. And the only change which we need right here is saying that this is API login. We don't have the name, we only have email and password. And we also don't have this thing right here, right? So you can see the rest of the stuff is pretty much the same. All right, so the next step is, once we have this login page, actually let's just go ahead and organize this in a better way. So we're going to be saying this as pages, and let's say I move this inside as register. Let's do a little bit of Next.js style things. Login, not exactly, but you know. And we can do create root, but I think we have not installed React 18 yet here, so it's fine. We can just keep it at render. We can remove this, and I have just removed some unnecessary files. It looks a bit cleaner. Now you can see we have an app which is being imported from the wrong place. So what I'm going to do is create an app component, And we're gonna also be using React router now, right? So in order to provide routing on the front end, we'll be doing what I'm gonna say as React router DOM. So this package right here allows us to perform React routing. That means different pages with the help of client-side routing. And finally, when we deploy it inside Node.js project as a static files, we will still be doing client-side routing, but that will be also be supported via server-side. We'll see when that happens. But anyway, for now, let's just import React from React, and I'm just gonna say app is a function which returns us this whole thing, right? So this thing right here is going to be imported from React router DOM, which Copilot was already able to guess, and this will be browser router, right? So this browser router just provides us with that functionality. We should also import something known as a route, which is gonna be something like path this component. This should be actually path login, component login, and this should be an exact match. And similar thing for register. And finally, we'll also import these two components from pages and login and register. Okay, I think it makes sense so far. So now if I go ahead and export this, export default app, you're going to be able to see that, let's see, we need to remove the CSS file imports, I think. And once we do that, it should work fine. So now if I go ahead and take a look right here, if I refresh, nothing happens because we don't have any route. But if I go to login, we get the login route, and if I go to register, we get the register route. Awesome. So now, one second. Now let me just refresh this once. What I want to do is inside of login part, we already have done most of the work which needs to be done in order to send the data. On the back end, inside our index.js file inside backend, we will also create a login endpoint which will do the similar thing, but it pretty much does nothing at the point. So let's just go ahead and create a new user called admin@admin.com and the same password. So once I register this, I get a status of OK. If I go to login now, if I try this, register this, you can see we get status OK and user true because my password was fine. And if I write 555 here, you see we get user false because my password was wrong. So that is fine, but how do we add authentication to this? Now in order to add authentication, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another package called JSON Web Token. And what this package would allow us to do is it will allow us to sign JWT tokens and retrieve them and basically work with them. And I have installed this on the client side, but actually it makes more sense to install it on the server side. So I'm going to say yarn add JSON Web Token on the server directory as well. So what this means is that we're going to be importing this. First of all, JWT is require JSON Web Token. This JWT right here can allow us to create a special token which only we can create and can allow us to determine that, hey, this user is legit, right? So we know that if the user account exists, we can send the user a JWT token. So we can say a token is jwt.sign. And what this is, as far as I remember, the secret or the private key is the second thing. So our secret is secret 123, but ideally your secret should be way secure. And the sign thing right here is just the payload which you want to sign, right? In this case, I just want to have an email request.body.email right here, and probably their name as well if you would want user.name, for example. And for the sake of consistency, you can also stick with user.email. And what you finally do is you just send this token down the wire. Now what will happen is that when you log in, if you go ahead and actually remove the fives, if you go ahead, you will see that you receive a token like this. Now what this token is, pretty much, it's nothing. It's just a base64 encoded variant of your payload with certain security embedded. And the way you know it is that you see these two full stops right here. And I'm just telling you about JWT right now. This is a standard example of JWT token. This JWT token has this payload, which is in between of these two dots. And this thing right here is base64 encoding. And if I try to decode this with A to B, what you will see is that this is a JSON payload, right? With the fields which we passed, name, admin, email, this, and also a creation time of the token specified by the JWT library itself, right? If you just go ahead and try to do it, you will see that this is actually the time of creation of this token. Okay, anyway, once we have this, pretty much no one can modify this information, because if they do, that token gets distorted. It will not pass the server-side check, so it's fine. I mean, we can just go ahead and use it right there. So what we can do once we have done that is we can go ahead and inside of our login app, we can say if data.user exists, then we can say alert login successful, else alert please check your username and password, right? Once the login is successful, you may very well just send them at a code page, right? window.location.href. So what this will do is it will allow us to create another route here, code.js, where we can just show the code of the user which they have, right? So I'm gonna have a code page here saying something like hello world, for example. And what we want to do is we want to have the user code being shown here, right? Or let's just name this dashboard instead of code. And this should also be dashboard. And one more thing, which is we can just name this as login. Okay, also let's just go ahead and define the route for this real quick. So dashboard, and import dashboard like this. And one more thing which you can do is inside dashboard, we need to verify if the user is logged in, right? So we're going to be writing a use effect hook, and we're going to be saying that, hey, if we are not able to find that JWT token with us, so I'm just going to say JWT from JSON Web Token, because we also installed it here. I can say my token is, first of all, we get it from local storage, which again, something we have to see. If we have token, then user is jwt.decode token, which is like Copilot is doing all the stuff. And we can say if user does not exist, that means something went wrong. Yeah, I mean, this kind of works, right? Which Copilot is writing. Instead, what we can do is make use of use history hook from React router. Use history. And once we do that, you will be able to see that we can just say history.replace and login right here. So this performs our check. And another check which we need to do, in fact, is that if user does not exist. If user does exist, what we want to do is perform this request to the backend and see if we can populate the code. So we can just say populate code right here. And what this will do is that this will be a function like this, which could be async. And what we can do is just say await fetch API/code const data is equal to API/code, and we can just say headers. We are just including this in the headers, X access token instead of cookies, and we can just say, what we did here, local storage.get item of token. Now, a quick recap of what we are doing here is that just after this component mounts, we run this use effect only once. If we found the token, that's well and good. That's well and good. We just populate the code by giving an HTTP request to /API/code, which should be actually localhost 1337/API/code. If not, then we redirect the user to the history.replace thing of login, right? Okay, so once we have the code with us, what we can say, this could be just request, and data is request.json. We can just say console log of data right now, just to see what we are getting, right? So the next thing which you want to do is right inside of our register page, We also want to say if data.status is okay, then I just navigate it to the login page, right? So I can just say history.push login, not push state, but actually push. And this history right here is again a hook which is provided by use React router DOM library, right? All right, so far what we have is if I go ahead and create another account, let's say Mehul @codedam.com on the same password, we get redirected to the login page. And if I have this as the login thing, you can see I get login successful. I click on OK and I get redirected to /dashboard, which just says me hello world at the moment, right? And inside of console, we see nothing happening. Inside of networks, also nothing happening. So that is probably not good, because yeah, nothing happens because we don't have the token stored. So what we want to do at login is the moment we get this token, we also want to store it. So I want to say local storage.set item token is data.user, right? Because this will now allow us to just send this token over and over again. So let's just perform the login one more time. And click login, and now you would be able to see that our local storage includes, not this one actually, this is from some other project. But if I do a local, let's just go ahead and do it one more time. And let's say login successful. And you can see right here, we have our token in place, right? And you can also see we get an error that 404 not found. So let's just go ahead and create this API now at the backend. So what I'm going to do is go to my index.js again, and create a new endpoint. And remember, this endpoint was get, it was not post. So we will just keep it get like this. But what I'll do is I'll say my token, first of all, is request.headers x-axis token, right? Because we want to perform authentication first. So I'm going to say const decoded is JWT.verify and then token and then secret123, which was the actual secret which I wrote, right? So this just verifies synchronously. You can also pass this as a callback if you would like. Synchronously, this verifies if your token is correct or not, right? And I think this throws you an error. I'm not sure if this throws an error or just returns a returns undefined. So it says that it returns you JWT or string. So it does not return you a null value. Yeah, so I'm hoping that this throws you an error. Anyway, so if this does throw you an error, what you want to do is try catch this block. And if we have a decoded token, what I want to do is the email should be decoded.email, right? And what I want to do inside catch, I want to say that, console.log error first, and then res.json status invalid token, or status basically error. Let's keep the format same. And error is invalid token, right? But right here, but right here inside API code, once we have the email, we can get the user. And once we have the user, we can get the code. So I can say return status okay, user, not user, but code could be user.code right here, which is inside our model, right? So that's fine, that will work, but you will see that we also need to create the code, right? Or add the code. So what we can do is also create a post route, which pretty much again is authenticated. We verify the token, we get the email, but the only thing which we say here is update one, email this, and set the code to be whatever we passed, right? So request.body.code, which will destruct from here. Status okay, and data is invalid in other case. Awesome. So I think that is pretty much all we need from the back end part. Yeah, it should be probably working just fine. Let's see how we can implement this on front end. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to say this is your code, and let's say this is code or no code found, something like this, right? And what I can do is make this code as a state variable, which will help us set this dynamically. So once we have the data, I can save data.status is okay. Then I just want to set the code to data.data, I guess. I think that's what we return, right? I go to index, we can see /API/code, get okay, and then the code. Okay, so data.code, not data.data. Else, I just want to say alert data.error, right? All right, so here we have the basic setup for at least displaying the code. And right here, you can see the moment I refresh it, we get no code found because fair enough. Okay, actually we are not returning anything. And the reason for that is probably we missed rest.json. Okay, now if I refresh this, you're gonna see that again, we get no code found because, okay, it says me undefined as the alert. And if I alert, you can say, see, we just get status okay. And the reason for that is because user.code is undefined, and undefined is not JSON serializable. So JSON just removes this. So what we want to do is actually provide the user an interface to set the code as well. The way we can do that is we can wrap this whole thing inside of a div and create an input field, or rather a form. Let's say input type text, placeholder code, value is temporary code, set value is, e set temp code, e.target.value, basic state management stuff, and you can just go ahead and create this like this. I also added a submit button, and I also am adding a handler to this, which is update code. What this function will do is it will just send the same update call, but this time to update the backend, right? So I'm just gonna say the same thing right here as populate, but instead of the get request, we're gonna be performing post request, and headers would be same. There would be one more body thing right here, and there would be a content type header here as well. Application JSON, and the body would be JSON.stringify the following thing, which is code as temp code right there. And the final thing which we can do is, we already have the set code thing. We can also say set temp code as empty, and that will be it, I guess, because we already have the backend ready on the server side. All right, so if everything is fine, I do believe this application should just work out of the box now. So, or maybe not, because we are missing an input button, I guess. Or was it just a refresh away? Yeah, we have an alert of some sorts, not sure why. So it's of populate code for some reason. Yeah, and that is because we are not using await on request.json. So we just have a promise here, and that should not be here as well. There we go. All right, so now it should work fine. If I go ahead and write a code, something like work today, or yeah, okay, so our code is not even working. Temp code and set temp code e.target.value. Not sure if it was not working or if it, oh, this is not set value on change. I think I should really go to bed. But anyway, let's complete this video. Work today, party later. I don't know, like I just randomly created this, and if I click on update code, nothing happens because we need another final thing, which is to prevent this event from refreshing the page. All right, let's hope this works now. Work today, party later. Update, we send a code request, and we have another problem on backend, I guess, because I think we are still, yeah. I'm always in the GraphQL based mode, right? Where you just return the response and it sends as JSON. Anyway, so if I refresh now, you can see our code is updated. We know that it works, but if I try to add new code here, updated code. Okay, we get no code found. That is because of, why is that? That is because of, let's see, inside update code, we set the temp code as that and set code as, no, this could be just temp code, right? Because we just sent the temp code, so we know that this will be the updated code. So refresh, hey there, update code, and you see that we get hey there as the code. So I mean, I think this will work fine now. If I go ahead and create a new account, if I go to register, mehul2@codedown.com and use the same password, register and log in again, login successful. Hey, I am Mehul2, update the code and we get hey, I am Mehul2. That's awesome. Now if I go ahead and log in again, but with my original username and password, hit login, login successful, we still have hey there code, right? And inside of the database, when we see, and the database, you can see that we have a full MERN stack database, and inside that we have a user data collection where we have all these records which we have created, right, with the code values. One final thing I want to just tell you before going from here is how you should store passwords, because that is, I think, super important thing and usually people miss out on videos like these. So I don't want to do that. You should absolutely not store passwords in plain text like this. The way to store passwords is the following. Go to your server folder and install a package called yarn add bcrypt.js. It could be bcrypt as well. I'm just using bcrypt.js because it does not install binaries of bcrypt, which are native binaries, and although it's a little slower, it just works like that. But if you're writing it for the prod, it's probably better to also consider bcrypt as the package. So bcrypt is a hashing algorithm, a hashing mechanism, which can secure your passwords by making a one-way hash of them. So what you want to do when somebody's trying to register is you try to create a new password by saying await bcrypt.hash request.body.password and give it some cycles, and usually 10 cycles are enough, and you store the hashed password instead of the regular logged in password, right? So this is the first step. Now the second step is how do you verify this? Because the moment somebody now tries to register on your app, let's say if I try to create a mehul3@codedown.com and do the same thing, what you're going to see inside of database is that Mehul3 right here has a weird password, right? And this is a hashed version of that password. Nobody can know what the original value was. This is basically garbage at this point. But you also want to verify it, right? How do you verify it then? So instead of performing a request like this, you find the user, without the password, and then you say something like, is password valid? Again, get a pilot to the rescue, bcrypt.compare, and you can see it accepts two arguments. The first one is the string and the second one is the hash. So the string is what we are getting from the user. So I'm going to say request.body.password. And the second is the hash, which is our user.password right here. So now the equation becomes if the password is valid, because user is always going to be valid more or less, right? Assuming that, you can even add a check like here, return status error, invalid login, something like that if you want. But yeah, I mean, once you do this, it will pretty much work like the same thing. So mehul3@codedown.com. You can see I get a login successful. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, update. But in this case, what we are doing is now we are hashing this password in the database. So it's much more secure. Why this is secure? Because in case your database gets compromised, then nobody can really crack this password and know the real password of the user until they haven't really put a single digit password, which you also allow. But anyway, the point is it makes it harder for hackers and crackers to reverse this password. So always make sure that whenever you're using any application in production, encrypt it with bcrypt or any good encryption library. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That is all it takes to create your standalone MERN stack application with authentication And that is all for this video. Probably in some part 2, we'll be taking a look at deployment of this application, where you actually deploy it on an EC2 or a DigitalOcean. So that is all for this video. I'm gonna see you in the next one really soon.